Hi everyone, welcome back. Michael Sandler here, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever wondered if angels were real, and if so, what one would say if you could ask your questions, then do we have the angelic show for you. Today I'll be talking with Jerry Gavin, best-selling author of Messages from Margaret and his brand new book, If You Could Talk to an Angel. And that's just what I want to talk with Jerry about today, and if we're lucky, talk with Margaret about an angel who communicates through him. I want to find out how we can talk with angels, what that really looks like, and then get answers from angels to the really big questions in life. That plus we'll talk about haunted houses, descending white spiders, mistakes, the lucky seven, hugging trees, and why letting a balloon go free may be the greatest experience in the world. So welcome to the show, Jerry. Are you ready to shine?
I am ready to shine. Thank you, Michael, so much for having me today.
Thank you, and a mighty woohoo!
Woohoo as well. So it's so great to be here.
Oh, it's fantastic having you here. So I'm going to roll back the clock a little bit, have us get into our time machine and take us all the way back to, I believe it was the fall of 1991. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us what was happening then?
A lot of changes were happening at that particular point in time. On a personal level, mm-hmm. I've been recently divorced just a little bit before that time, and my two daughters, I was looking for ways to kind of have extra money for all of the different activities they want to do, as little daughters will want to do, for gymnastics and learning to play drums and doing all kinds of other things. And I was trying to think of a way to afford having things more easily. So I decided rather than renting an apartment, I was going to look for a space in someone else's house. I could just, find a friend, rent a room, do mm-hmm. something of that nature. And I had met someone who actually just recently was engaged to be married and had bought a house, and her engagement fell apart. So now she had this big house and financially was worried about how to be able to afford it. So the synchronicity of that situation seemed great. Mm-hmm. She was looking to rent out a room. I was looking to get a room, and that's what happened. So I move in this house, and it was a beautiful center hall colonial, lots of light shining through, and it just thought, wow, what a beautiful, beautiful place. And lo and behold, I'm living there about, 2 months into living there. As mm-hmm. it starts to get into the third month, I start to notice some really, really strange things that are occurring. And by strange things, I mean I would shut the lights off at night to get ready to go to sleep, and there would be these specters that would be in the air. Almost, if I could describe it, it would be like a yin and yang sort of shapes, as we often will see those kind of little teardroppy sort of shapes, but these were all black and grayish and just constantly moving about and swooping down, by my face. And so I tried closing my eyes, and it would still happen. Even when I was closing my eyes, I could still feel it. Then I could hear breathing next to me on the bed. And eventually this voice one night that I heard just so clearly and raspily saying, get out of this place, And I'm right now, Michael, I'm pretty much thinking that the pressure, the divorce, and everything else has made me go crazy, This is
because if not, you would have been out, right?
Right. And I'm thinking to myself, this is just pretty insane. I'm something is wrong. This is definitely something is wrong, and I'm trying to ignore it because I am thinking this has just got to be because I'm going through so much pressure. I was pretty much a skeptic at that point in time. I mean, I thought that ghosts existed, and I thought, that angels existed and those kinds of things. And I'd watched movies with haunted houses, but to me, that was just such a far-fetched experience that I would never have thought of it. And this was going on for about 2 weeks and seemed to be escalating itself, where one morning I finally had the courage to speak to Gail, my roommate, who happens to actually be my girlfriend now, many years later, and many changes in our lives, but they all kind of came full circle.
I love that.
But I asked Gail, do you notice anything unusual about the house, is kind of, figuring if she said, no, everything is fine, I would just not discuss it any further. But when I asked her that, her response was like, why? Why are you asking? Did you see something? Is there something you noticed? Why? Is there anything unusual you see? And I felt like, all right, something's going on. And I said, okay, you first. And she began to tell me in her experiences, she was not seeing things, but things were moving around on her all the time. Jewelry in particular. She would put her jewelry away and she would find it in another place. She would put something else someplace and it would be in another place. One day, actually, a funny story, we went out to lunch, and so she took her jewelry and she put it in one of those little velvety sort of bags that jewelry will go in, put it inside a little jewelry cabinet that was inside a bigger cabinet, locked up the jewelry cabinet, locked up the bigger cabinet, and we went out to lunch. And as we went out to lunch, I was getting ready to pay the check and just wanted to make change to make it a little bit easier, and asked her if she had any change. And she went into her purse and came out with the packet that had the jewelry that she had just put in at the velvet bag. So this just kept getting worse. And now there was a mist that would distend the stairway from upstairs to downstairs. Members of the family were starting to get physically ill. It just felt as though this was getting to be kind of a serious situation. So we called upon, both of us had grown up Catholic. We weren't active Catholics by any means, but we had seen The Exorcist, so we figured Catholic priests know about this stuff. So we went to our local church and we spoke to the pastor of the parish and asked him if he could please come to the house, and maybe by blessing the house it would help.
Which he did. Some cases that maybe the problem could be resolved if we went to church more.
Your sound, this is wild. Your sound is completely changed, and yes, you sound like you're sucking helium right now in a non-usable fashion.
Wow, that's bizarre. That's really bizarre. So is it going back to
Well, right now, I think what we're going to do is I have to try calling you back and see if it was a Skype connection or something.
Okay.
If you could hear this, you would think that some spirit has actually cut in.
Wow, that's so bizarre. That's so bizarre.
So
it's an interesting sort of a thing, because I can remember when I would tell the story, after everything was done and over, if I would speak to people and I would talk to them about the story, I would feel the feeling of it all over again. And that hasn't certainly happened for a really, really long time. But it is interesting that would even occur at this point. It might just be a stop thing, but it's kind of unusual. But
interesting timing. Well, the way I hear you, I don't think I could use on a call. It's sort of like, do you remember Battlestar Galactica, the robots in that?
Sure.
It's like Battlestar Galactica robots sucking helium is what you sound like right now.
Okay.
So I'll call you right back.
Hey, how are you?
Wow. So Jessica doesn't usually come in when in the studio when I'm recording, and she just came in to check to make sure I was okay, because the cat just ran downstairs to let her know something was up.
Wow, this is weird.
This is also not the first time something like this has happened with us.
Is that right? Wow,
so
that's pretty interesting. So what's the voice sound like now? Is that
it sounds perfect now?
Okay.
So I think we've had a little interesting situation.
That is pretty interesting.
So let's see where we sew it in. We had you talking about there was a mist coming down the stairs. Family members were starting to get sick. And whatever you said next, it's all of a sudden where you started talking.
That's weird. So what I was saying next is I was talking about going to see our parish priest.
Yes.
So the parish priest came to our home, and it was just a very interesting situation because he came in the front foyer, which is a pretty big front foyer that was in the house. And he said a couple of prayers and he spread some holy water around, but he couldn't wait to get out of the house. He was so anxious to leave. And when we said to him, well, Father, most of this stuff's going on upstairs. Would you like to go up and do the holy water upstairs? He said, no, that's okay. The holy water spreads, so everything will be fine. And it wasn't. It seemed as though whatever had happened by doing that seemed to just aggravate whatever was there even more so. And what was odd is I just, this is the kind of thing you don't really talk to with anybody. I mean, now both of us, I think, are trying to figure out if we're crazy, except that we're seeing the same things now, so we know something is happening. And we couldn't, you said a really interesting thing in the beginning of the interview. If it had been the sort of thing where I didn't think I was crazy in the beginning, I would have just moved. But, she had just bought this house, and I felt really badly as well that she had just bought this house and all this stuff was going on, and I don't want to just abandon her with these ghosts. So we decided we needed to try to figure out what to do. And I made a call to a friend of mine who'd been a friend of mine since high school, and asked him just told him the situation. I said, I'm not crazy, but this is just so bizarre. Like, what would you do? And he says, you really should call my therapist, and talk to her. And I was like, no, honest, I'm not crazy. He's like, no, I know you're not. But the reason why I want you to call my therapist is, he said, you know me, I've been in therapy all my life. And he said, I found this therapist who also happens to be this really gifted psychic. And it's the best. He said, I am blown through therapy because every time I don't want to talk about something, she goes, well, who's so-and-so and who is so-and-so and what's this that I'm seeing? And he said, so I can't avoid anything. I have to go there. And he said, she's amazing. And he said, I'm not saying it because I think you need therapy, but maybe because of the psychic stuff, she might be able to help you out. So I called her. And before I even got a chance to tell her anything, she began right away to ask, what's going on with your house? What's happening there? He said, the chaos of the energy in this house is just crazy. And she said, do me a favor, grab a piece of paper and a pen, and I'm going to give you something that you need to do, or a ritual that you need to do in the house. And I did that. So here I am. I'm going from complete skeptic. I'm talking to a psychic who's telling me she's getting stuff from the house and basically is now channeling, which I hadn't really heard of channeling before that, channeling this information that I should copy down for a ritual that we're supposed to do. And I got off the phone and I thought to myself, well, if I wasn't crazy before, I am now, because, look at the things we're going to do. And we proceeded to do that. She told us, by the way, that we needed to put the information, what we were going to do, to put it on either really big cue cards or one of those big pads like you see people use in business presentations. And she said it's not unlikely that what's going to happen is that as you're trying to talk, you may have trouble talking. You may find out your words are coming out in the wrong order or other things, and you don't want to lose focus of what you're doing. So this should be in a spot you can see it really clearly, and if you have a little trouble, you can go back to reading it. So we did that. She also told me it was really important. I need to get a compass so I can find out where the north end of the room is, so that I could stand on the northern part of whatever room we were going to be in.
I don't want to jump in too much. I want to let you keep going here, but that's a fascinating point, because reading that in your book, she was putting you right between the crosshairs.
She was, and the interesting part is that I asked her about that after the fact, because it was a crazy experience. I mean, when all of that energy was leaving as we did this ritual, and it was setting off smoke alarms. It was, Michael, it really was like watching a science fiction movie, in that there was banging in the walls. There were drawers opening and closing. There were doors opening and closing. There were kind of things that if we had not been there and seen it, we just never would have believed that the story if somebody else told us this story. And when it was all done, Gail felt great. My daughter that was involved in it also, very tired but felt better. The energy of the house seemed to feel better. It was almost like one of those Disney movies where after all the noise was over and things seemed to quiet down after the third time we did it, suddenly you heard like birds chirping outside and the sun was shining through windows.
Nice.
And it felt so good, you know. I felt like crap. I just felt so terrible when it was done. And interestingly enough, Gail, who will always say she doesn't have psychic abilities or whatever, but she really does. She had asked me just before we did this the last time, she said, do me a favor, could you just put this in your pocket? And she handed me one of those blister packs of AA batteries, you know, when there are 4 or 5 batteries in a pack. And I put it in my pocket, you know. We joked around about, oh, I feel like, you know, the Energizer Bunny now. And when we were done and I reached in my pocket and I took the batteries out, they had all melted. And they just totally melted inside this blister pack. That next 2 to 3 weeks after that, I had that effect on everything electronic. I went through 3 car batteries. These were the days before cell phones when we had pagers. I just kept replacing pager after pager after pager. And what was happening was batteries were melting inside the pagers. My car batteries, two of the batteries that I had to bring back, thank God they were all under warranty, they were like imploding, you know? And that was causing problems with alternators and all kinds of other electrical things. And that gets back to the very good point that you said, which is I called this psychic back and the psychic therapist, and I said to her, look, what's going on? I'm like destroying everything. And she said, oh, good. So you were standing in the northern point like I asked you.
Good.
Right. And proceeds to tell me that she wanted me to stand there because all of the energy that was leaving the house was leaving through me. And that was really important because of 2 things. One, that I was probably among the 3 people there, the one who would most be able to withstand that energy coming through. And the second, because I was going to be working with energy in the future, so it was important for me to be able to delineate between energy that was of a lower vibration and energy of a higher vibration. And I laughed hysterically and said, there is no way I am ever doing anything with this kind of stuff again. I'm just so happy it's out of the house now. That's all I need to know. I'm done. Thank you. Right. So little did I know, at that point, my friend Gail was kind of changing careers, and she was thinking about going to massage school. And as she was talking about it, I thought, well, that's a really cool concept because, you know, people had told me I was really good with my hands. A couple of people have said you should study massage. And I thought, you know, maybe that's good. Again, very practical, great way to make extra money. And, you know, I could do that on the side. And I'm thinking this is really good. So we were looking at different schools. One was a very traditional massage school. I really liked that one. Gail found another one that was a great massage school. It was taught by a woman who had studied at the Swedish Institute. She also happened to put in her information thing that she had studied with Latin American and Native American shamans, and we had to actually interview with her, and she talked about different things. And I left that interview saying, I don't want to go to this school. And of course, Gail was all excited about it. She was like, no, I love this school. She sounds great. So we decided to go there. And going there and her introducing us to these different shamanic experiences reawakens all this stuff in me. And I'm fighting it tooth and nail. I just didn't want to experience any of the experiences I was going through. But there were visions that were coming up. There were past life memories that were coming up. All kinds of things that were occurring until finally my teacher of the school said, why do you keep fighting this? Why don't you just go with it and learn about it, and then rather than having these experiences happening to you whenever they feel like, perhaps you could start to control how they come and, you know, things of that nature, which is what I did. And that led me into shamanism. That led me into doing a lot of shamanic journeying work and eventually into doing the soul retrieval work that I do so much now, and eventually led to speaking with Margaret, although that was not at all a shamanic experience. That was a whole other.
In a 10-second version, for people who aren't familiar with it, what does it mean to be involved in shamanism?
So Shamans are basically the healers of tribal people. They have been around since the dawn of time. And the thing about shamanism is that when you go to a shaman who's kind of that combination of doctor and priest, or doctor and minister, the shaman is looking at you from a very holistic concept. And the concept being, if there's something wrong, then that means you're out of balance somewhere. You're out of balance within your own body, you're out of balance with the earth, or you're out of balance with your spirit, with your soul, with your connection to who you are. So everything involved in shamanism has to do with bringing about balance. The thing that shamans are able to do, though, is to actually communicate with other forms of energy that are on the planet, and to be able to kind of bend through that time-space continuum so that they're able to communicate with animals, communicate with plants, and to see visions of things that have happened at other points in time. And that gives the shaman the ability to gather information from those other sources that will help people to heal, whether it's what particular herb would really be able to help them, or what past experience was the cause of them developing a certain physical ailment or emotional problem.
Beautiful. So going from there, clearly you've gone down the rabbit hole at this point, or you've taken, the red pill. When did you say, I want to talk with angels, and what happened?
The interesting thing about that is that really wasn't... I noticed in all the things I was doing, all the things that had come about as the shamanism, there was no communication with angels. There were spirit guides that have come up, and power animals, and all kinds of other things, but angels had never come to the forefront. And I wondered about that, because my background belief system was that they existed, and I started to really kind of question if they did, but the feeling that they did just sort of kept getting stronger and stronger. And I just was going through a really, really rough personal time at that period of time. There was a lot of conflicts that were happening. There was a lot of things that just felt, I needed help. I really needed some advice from somebody who wasn't going to give me typical advice and say, you're right, she's wrong, this is terrible, you know what I mean, and get me all riled up in my own stuff. And so one night I just lay down on my bed and I closed my eyes and I said, you know what? I know you're out there. I know that there are angels out there. If you could tell me your name, I know I would figure out a way to talk to you. And when I closed my eyes, there was this like white movie screen, and in big, bold black letters, like you would see the headline of a newspaper, the name Margaret spelled out. And I opened my eyes and I thought to myself, where did that come from? Margaret? That's definitely not an angel name. So let me try it again. Maybe I'm getting closer. And I asked again, like, what's your name? If you can tell me your name. And now it was like a black background, big white letters, Margaret. And it's like, all right, stop with the Margaret. Really, what's your name? Because I'm thinking, I'm waiting for Ezekiel or something where trumpets are going to go off, and
Raphael.
Raphael, yeah, something of that nature. Like Margaret. I mean, there was only one person in my life at that point that I knew named Margaret, and we weren't really crazy about each other, so it was an odd choice of name to me. I asked again, and this time, Michael, it was like, you know how when you go on your computer and you're typing something, there's all these different font choices that you could use? Was the word Margaret in every possible font and color, and coming up in front of me and zooming back. It was like she was trying to make it very clear. It's Margaret. It really is Margaret. And at that point, I accepted okay, it's Margaret. And what came into my head was a method of psychic communication called automatic writing, and where you start a letter to your best friend in the world, closest advisor in the world, talking about what your issues are, what your problems are, what you're trying to get clarity about, and then you start a letter back to yourself. And again, now I've gone through a lot of experiences, but I'm doing this and I'm thinking, this is really crazy, Jerry,
And this is the Neale Donald Walsch method.
Right. Basically, which I learned later on because I hadn't read Conversations with God. I'm not even sure if Conversations with God had come out yet, but it is. It's that Neale Donald Walsch method where you write a letter and you just start back. And I start back and I start writing. And I was kind of filled with a lot of anger over a lot of situations in my life at that part. So the letter I was writing was really filled with a lot of venom. And I'm expecting that the letter back is going to be filled with as much venom and as much upset. But instead, it starts off with these words I never start a letter off, which was, "Hello, dear one, and welcome." And then proceeds to just so gently and kindly and lovingly and compassionately talk about the situations that I'm in, how I kind of created those situations, not realizing that I was creating them, the situations in the background of my life, this incarnation, that had sort of set the format for doing that in terms of what really wasn't being talked about then, which was now is called the law of attraction that everyone is talking about, and how other people were feeling in terms of my reactions, my actions, the things that I was doing. And those were the most interesting because they were the really compassionate viewpoint towards everybody else who I felt was not being very compassionate and kind towards me. So my little scientific mind said, all right, let's test this out. Let's call some of these people and say, by any chance, could you be feeling this way? I've been thinking a lot about, that fight we had or that problem we had, or could you be feeling this way? And one after another, each one was like, yeah, I do. And one of those people, they didn't even know how to put in words what they were feeling until I said to them, could you be feeling this way? And then they got that clarity from it. So that made me feel I had clearly tapped into something. And that led to just hundreds of letters that I wrote to her to get a better sense of then a lot about my life to start off with, but then bigger questions, those big questions that you sort of really would like to know about. And that was the beginning of our relationship.
So how long was it between then and when you started, I don't know if coming out is the right term, but started working with others? But we'll call it like coming out of the angelic closet.
Exactly. Well, all right. So I partially came out of the angelic closet maybe 2 years after that. It was a good year of writing my own messages and just sharing it with select people. Now, very interestingly, my friend who had hooked me up with the psychic counselor at this point had stopped going to therapy and had so been moved by the whole psychic sort of thing that he had really now started speaking to other psychics and doing other things. So when we had a conversation about what was going on with Margaret, he was totally open to that information and said, I really should hook you up with my friend who is a psychic because she could probably help you to know what to do with this. How do you extend this to other people? And so I called her. And we set up an appointment to get together. And I was really happy that she was going to be able to help me. But when I get there, she's like, I'm so happy you're here. I have so many questions for Margaret, And that I had not expected. I'm there to ask her questions. I wasn't there ready for, and I even said that, like, I'm not a psychic. I'm just getting this information, and I sort of wanted to know, can it help people, or what would I do? And she said, well, let's talk, and she began to ask all kinds of questions, and Margaret's responses were amazing, which then had her call 2 more people over to the house who were also both really gifted psychics, really good people, and they had questions for her, and that she was able to help to clarify and to bring into a new direction. And they actually then started to refer me people, folks that they had just not been able to break through with, that they thought or who couldn't seem to move forward. And that was how this whole thing started. It just, out of meeting with them to try to get a sense of what to do, it just started in referrals, and I started doing readings for people that were just always that method, that writing method. So it started as completely illegible handwriting, other than the fact that I would talk while I was doing it, which people would have no idea of what I was writing, but I would still hand them that illegible copy, and they would cherish it and try to figure out how to read it again. And then I started typing it on the computer because that was at least a little bit more legible, but I spent, I think, probably as much time in correcting the Word document as I spent in the reading. And it was only in what were 2000? We're in 2016 now, 2012.
Yeah.
That I started to just channel Margaret directly, and to let her speak. 2013, actually, very beginning of 2013, and that was just a whole different experience to just channel her live.
So for this next section of the interview, I actually, if we could, I'd love for you to be able to channel her. I do have one question before that, though. Mm-hmm. So this is since 93 to so 20 years you've been communicating with an angel. How has that changed you? I'm trying to think if we truly knew who was around us at all times. And I've tried to live, and I forget this often, but I try to live as if my elders are around me. And by that I mean my spiritual elders, or the elders coming a little bit of your vein, the elders with the drums, with the bells, with the chants. If they were around, how would I live my life? You're getting this firsthand. How has that transformed everything you've done?
So tremendously. I mean, the first aspect in terms of that transformation is that when you start to realize that, first of all, when you come to understand that we all come from the same energy, mm-hmm. it really makes it hard to hate people. It makes it hard for you to have conflict with people. You mm-hmm. may still have it. People might hurt your feelings, but the ability to kind of look at that from a little bit of a bigger picture really starts to change things. The knowledge of creating this life, of knowing that I'm instrumentally creating this life, then has me have to look at this life all the time. You know, like whatever I'm experiencing, I've got to look at it and go, all right, so why exactly is this happening? You know, there's something still going on that has to be attracting this particular aspect to me. And then you start to then look at, well, what are the things in your life that are actual blocks that you're trying to clarify? And what are some of the things that are actually happening at the right and proper time as well? You know, like when I was writing this most recent book with Margaret, there were times I just could not get information. I mean, it's not that I wouldn't get it, but it was like there was something in me stopping myself from sitting down to get it. Mm-hmm. And then when I would finally sit down and stuff would flow, it would be about situations that were from most recent experiences. And she would explain that was why we didn't waste a lot of time on other things, because there were other circumstances coming up that she sort of felt were messages that were going to be much more important. So knowing in advance who was going to be making phone calls and knowing in advance some of the topics that were going to be coming up, she would figure, rather than me writing every single day about stuff we weren't going to talk about, there would be that flow. So I'm kind of getting a better handle of and I'm still saying kind of getting. There's no, I sort of don't care who you are, at what point in the learning spectrum or the knowledge of evolution that you have. We're still human. So our humanness is always there in the forefront. So I'm still trying to get that sense of believing that everything happens at its right and proper time, and that I'm not missing something that I'm supposed to be doing, or thinking that, oh man, I missed that opportunity, or I missed this opportunity. It's getting a little bit easier to realize that there is some things that we do in life that are so important that we have to act upon, but there's never a missed opportunity. It will always find a way to funnel its way back.
Awesome.
That's the thing that you really want to do.
And I think that's so important for people to hear, because that's extremely, not only is it healing for the heart, but talk about if we can truly embody that, lifting a weight off of our shoulders, myself as much as anybody else. Am I getting everything done that I need to get done? Is there something I should wait?
Right. I mean, for me, when I first started to channel Margaret, within those first couple of years, the concept of writing a book called Messages from Margaret came up during that time. Mm-hmm. It was 2008 when I finally sat down to write that book to start. It was 2010 when I actually kind of got to the process of doing it. So there was so much time in between, but the timing was perfect at the point that it happened. You know, I don't know what would have happened if it was written earlier. You know, so It's hard to say.
So let's go from there. I don't know. I've never experienced this process with you before. I have no idea how you channel, but if you could walk us through this or bring Margaret to the forefront. If I start to stutter a little bit, I've never spoken with an angel, so forgive me here.
She's extremely easy to talk to, very funny and just very insightful. So for me, it's an interesting process. Usually I'll just take a sip of water or something, and I'll just send her and ask her to come through, and she just comes through. I always feel her come through because immediately the thing that will happen is that this feeling of well-being will come over me. A smile will always come to my face, and my voice changes to a little bit softer, almost like feminine, masculine quality within that, because this gentleness that comes forward. And then one of the wonderful parts about channeling her live, like whether it's at events or now being able to do it, is that she has that wonderful opportunity to kind of utilize me, to utilize my hands, to utilize my vision, to utilize everything that allows her to come through in that human form. So yeah, I would be happy to do that. Let me just take a sip of water and just get centered for a second, and I'll bring it right there.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like below. Also, leave your comments. Have some real fun with it. Subscribe to our channel where you're going to get more great videos, more interviews coming up. And check out our website, inspirenationshow.com. That's where you'll find tips, blogs, information, videos you won't find anywhere else, and useful and helpful resources to really help you kickstart your life and to shine bright. Thanks so much again. Thank you for your support. Like, comment, subscribe. See the website. Thanks so much and have fun. Of course, shine bright. Woohoo!